After defeating Demeter, you would think things would start to get easier. But no. Olympus decides that halfway through the story, you're going to be facing one of the toughest enemies that you have faced to date. And in a world of mechanical gods hunting around for you in every corner, there is still a beast lurking in the shadows. Let's take it down. The next fight that we'll be going over takes place in Chapter 11. This node has 4 arrows on it, with only 3 of them containing battles. The first arrow is going to be a very simple node that contains casters, lancers, and berserkers to take down. The second arrow is going to have assassins and casters, along with 1 berserker chimera. For both of those fights, we're going to have Musashi as the NPC that you can use to help out. And then one cutscene later, we go to arrow 3, where we take on the Beast of Taming. The Beast of Taming has 3 break bars, with 4 HP bars in total, and you're going to need everything you've got against this enemy. Let's start with the passives for this fight. The Beast of Taming's first passive is Nega Weapon. It gains attack advantage against hominid servants, and gains defensive disadvantage against demonic beast type servants. Now, what exactly is the hominid-based servants trait? Well, it's literally every single servant in this game, with the exception of 1, and she doesn't come out until summer of this year. The demonic beast servants available for this fight that will get a buff here will be Asterios, Gorgon, Casey and Lobo, and of course, all forms of Tamamo. Tamamo Caster, Tamamo Cat, and Tamamo Lancer. And red hair too, can't forget him. We'll get to server suggestions later though. The next buff is the Eternal Darkness Gradiation. It's increased resistance against Noble Phantasm attacks and critical attacks. It lasts for the first 3 turns and unremovable. For the first 3 turns of the fight, my recommendation is do not attack her. Focus on just trying to survive. Focus on maybe just trying to get your Noble Phantasms up and go from there. Next up, we have Permafrost Koyanskaya. At the start of battle, Beast of Taming gains Noble Phantasm Generation, which charges MP gauge 1 per turn for the first 3 turns. She also gets a critical rate up for 3 turns, invincibility for 1 turn, and inflicts all enemies with attack down for 3 turns. Now let's move on to her active skills. Fear Me, Respect Me. This inflicts all enemies with a delayed debuff, which is a chance to stun, and a death trigger debuff, which grants Beast of Cherishment 50,000 HP and attack up when an enemy is defeated for 3 turns. You heard me. 50k HP and attack up. So do your best when this skill is active not to have your servers die. Next up, we have Curse Swelling. Inflicts all enemies with Curse, which has a 400 damage per turn for 10 turns. Lastly, Dim Radiance. Grants herself a chance-based evasion 5 times or 2 turns, and increases own critical rate for 1 turn. These skills are pretty tough, but this Noble Phantasm is going to hurt a little harder as well. Star of Calamity. Deals damage to all enemies and inflicts curse damage up on them for 3 turns. That's quite a bit, especially when she has a skill that gives a curse for 10 turns. This Noble Phantasm just hurts. I don't really have anything to say about it. It's when you see it, it's gonna hurt, and unfortunately, it's gonna be a lot of times when you're not gonna be able to dodge this one. So what happens when you break those break bars? Gonna be some nasty effects, unfortunately. When you break the first bar, Frozen Flame Era Koyanskaya, the Beast of Taming charges her Noble Phantasm gauge to max. It increases own critical damage for 3 turns, decreases defense and crystal generation of all enemies for 3 turns. That Noble Phantasm will come to hit you right out the gate when you break the first bar. My opinion, if you have anything that gives you defense up, invincibility, anything like that will be very good here, at least to survive that 1 hit. But when you break that bar, you have to go ahead and deal with this next effect. Eternal Empire Toyonskapan. Reduce own Noble Phantasm gauge by 1 and defense down for 3 turns. Grant attack up for 3 turns. Increase MP gauge by 20% and removal of all debuffs and heal 2000 HP to all enemies. This one's going to be easy street. You might find that you'll be able to get through this bar a lot easier because of all the debuffs that she has, plus the buffs to you. Lastly, when you break the last bar, you get World's Creation and Destruction Cycle Koyanskaya. Grants attack up for 3 turns, damage up for 3 turns, increasing MP gauge by 1, HP generation for 5 turns, and guts. 1 time for 150,000 HP. Fun fact, each one of these health bars represents the time that you have faced Koyanskaya inside of the Lost Belt. And that's exactly why I actually take down her second health bar that she gets a lot of debuffs, because that was Lost Belt 3 of Sin, where Mothman literally destroys him. And that's going to be the only time I thank you for that. Now, in terms of server recommendations, if you have access to a Taming no Mai or anything like that, I would highly suggest you do so. Taming no Mai is going to be very good with her skill set here, especially in this fight, with healing, of increasing her own defense, lowering noble phantasms while increasing noble phantasm damage for the party if you have that skill unlocked. It is going to be a very good time for you. So for those of you who have her, definitely put her on the support list for a while for people to use her. Or if you have her, pull her out and definitely use her for this fight. Some free-to-play suggestions: if you are an older player, then you'll have access to Oda Nobunaga, who is actually going to do a lot of damage in this fight with her second skill, that increases own damage against divine enemies for 1 turn. For those who have played the game a little bit more recently, Shuten Dojin Caster actually be very good here as well, with the third skill that she has increasing her own damage against demonic enemies for 3 turns, on top of increasing her regular party attack overall. So this is going to be very good for multiplicative stacking. And for some even more utility, she has Ignore Evasion. So for those chances where she has Evasion up, this will go ahead and ignore that, and that'll be very good for you. Let's move on to the 4-star recommendations, and we're going to start with St. Martha Ruler. She's a summer servant that you can still kind of get if the gacha is lucky enough, and she is really good here. Mainly because her third skill, Jacob's Limbs, gives her increased damage against Demon, Divine, and Undead. So already she's getting 2 special damage buffs in her third skill. Because it only lasts for 1 turn though, I would definitely set that up to where you would use it for her Noble Phantasm here, and just do a lot of damage overall. Can't mention demons without mentioning Rama. This is going to be one of the high damage dealing sabers that deals specifically against demons. Mainly from the Noble Phantasm, which is actually very good after its strengthening, because it not only reduces their buster resistance, it also reduces one demonic enemy's EP gauge by 1. And it also has this deal extra damage to demonic enemies. And now for the heavy hitters. I already mentioned Tamamo from the 5-star slot, but if you happen to have a chance to get a Skyhawk here, they're actually pretty good as well. Otako Daiku's waifu here has a God Slaying buff, which also increases own damage against divine enemies for 1 turn. And her Noble Phantasm has a 5% chance to stun the enemy, so that gives you a chance to stall her out and give you a chance to breathe. It's your boy Super Orion. If you see him on the Archer slot, definitely pick him up because he is a monster. He already has for the first buff, increased own damage against wild beasts or demonic enemies, both of which actually apply here. He has his own guts, which actually be super clutch in case he dies in the fight. And on his Noble Phantasm, he has a way to give himself more stars, increase attack, ignore invincibility, and self-debuff immunity. This is very good. This is going to be a very good server to bring along. The list goes on and on, but the whole thing is you definitely need service that will help you deal against demon enemies or divine enemies. These 2 are very important. If you have someone like Arjuna or Karna, that actually works out pretty well. But Beast of Taming also counts as a super large enemy. So people like Fujino or Prototype Arthur are actually good here as well. And lastly, for recommendations, if you have any command codes or craft essences that give you increased damage to divine enemies, this will be very helpful here. And when you finally take down this fight, you're rewarded not only with 2 gold materials, but a story cutscene to catch your breath and a Saint Quartz. And that about do it for the Beast of Taming boss guide. But we have way more bosses to talk about here. Olympus does not let up. So the next fight that we'll be talking about will be up here in the right hand corner. But if you just need any tips at all, definitely head over down here. I'll go over everything you need to know, plus 1 more boss fight, just in case you're having trouble with that goddess Demeter. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you there.